An elderly man drowning in debt is forced to offer his virgin daughter as payment to a millionaire. When the young woman finds out the truth, she tries to escape, but everything is legally binding. However, she discovers an unexpected strength to fight back. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Stay tuned. Walter Bennett stared at the final notice in his trembling hands. The bold red letters blurred as tears welled in his eyes. At 72, this wasn't how he had imagined spending his golden years. Drowning in debt, facing eviction from the modest Connecticut home where he had raised his daughter, and watching his small accounting practice crumble under the weight of poor investments and a changing economy. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across his cluttered office. Stacks of unpaid bills loomed like sentinels of his failure. Outside, the maple trees that lined his property, trees he had planted when he first bought this place 30 years ago, swayed in the autumn breeze, their leaves turning the same fiery red as the foreclosure notices that now decorated his desk. Walter removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. How had it come to this? One bad investment had led to another, then a desperate loan from Meridian Financial Group to cover the first, followed by a second loan with even worse terms. The interest rates were criminal, though perfectly legal in the fine print he had been too desperate to read carefully. His retirement savings had vanished 2 years ago. His wife's medical insurance had barely covered half of her treatments before she passed, leaving him with medical bills that seemed to multiply like bacteria in a petri dish. And Emily, his beautiful, brilliant Emily. 22 years old, just graduated from Dartmouth with honors in environmental science. His daughter knew things were tight, but he had carefully shielded her from the true extent of their financial ruin. She believed he was merely going through a temporary rough patch. She had no idea that tomorrow, unless a miracle occurred, they would lose everything. The phone rang, startling him from his spiral of despair. Walter hesitated before answering, expecting another collection agency. "Mr. Bennett, this is Calvin Marshall's office calling." Walter's breath caught in his throat. Calvin Marshall, founder and CEO of Marshall Enterprises, one of the largest private equity firms in the country. The same Calvin Marshall whose company owned Meridian Financial Group, which held Walter's crushing debt. The same man who had been relentlessly trying to acquire Walter's 5 acres of land for the past 3 years for some mysterious development project. "Mr. Marshall would like to meet with you this evening at his estate. A car will be sent for you at 7. It wasn't a request. Before Walter could respond, the line went dead. Hope and dread battled in his chest as he straightened his tie in the mirror. Calvin Marshall didn't personally meet with small-time debtors. Something else was happening here. Perhaps this was the miracle he had been praying for, a chance to negotiate, to explain his situation face-to-face with the man who ultimately controlled his fate. The Blacktown car arrived precisely at 7. As Walter settled into the plush leather seat, he gazed one last time at his modest colonial home. The porch light left on for Emily, who was staying late at her lab in New Haven. He hadn't told her about this meeting. What would be the point? Better to wait and see if anything came of it before giving her false hope. An hour later, the car passed through imposing iron gates and wound up a long driveway flanked by perfectly manicured gardens that seemed to glow silver in the moonlight. Marshall's estate sat on the Gold Coast of Connecticut, a sprawling mansion overlooking Long Island Sound. Walter had read about the place in magazines. 28 rooms, an indoor pool, a private art collection, worth millions. The kind of wealth that made Walter's entire life seem like a rounding error. A stone-faced butler escorted him through the cavernous marble foyer, past priceless paintings and antiques, to a study that was larger than Walter's entire first floor. The walls were lined with leather-bound books that looked as though they had never been opened. A fire crackled in a fireplace big enough to roast an ox. Calvin Marshall stood with his back to the door, gazing out at the moonlit water. Even from behind he commanded attention, tall, broad-shouldered, his silver hair perfectly coiffed. When he turned, Walter was struck by his sharp blue eyes, calculating and cold, despite the smile that didn't quite reach them. "Mr. Bennett, thank you for coming on such short notice." His voice was smooth as aged whiskey, with the faintest trace of a southern accent that decades in New England hadn't quite erased. "Please, sit." Walter sank into a leather armchair that probably cost more than his car. "Mr. Marshall, I appreciate this opportunity to discuss my situation. If I could just have an extension on the loan—" Marshall raised a hand, silencing him. "I'm not interested in discussing extensions or payment plans, Mr. Bennett. Your debt to my company currently stands at $827,000, including interest and penalties. You have no assets left to leverage except your property, which I've been trying to acquire. You'll be bankrupt by the end of the week." Walter's heart sank. So this wasn't about negotiation. Perhaps Marshall had merely brought him here to personally witness his humiliation. "However," Marshall continued, pouring 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter, "I may have a solution that benefits us both." He handed 1 glass to Walter, who accepted it with a trembling hand. "A way to forgive your debt entirely." Walter nearly dropped the glass. "Forgive? The entire amount?" Marshall nodded, sitting across from him. "I've been watching you for some time, Mr. Bennett. More specifically, I've been watching your daughter." Ice formed in Walter's veins. "Emily? What does she have to do with this?" "Everything." Marshall took a slow sip of his drink. "She's quite extraordinary. Graduated top of her class, published research on sustainable agriculture at 20. Beautiful, intelligent, and from what my sources tell me, untouched by the cynicism of casual relationships." Walter set his untouched drink on the table, a sick feeling growing in his stomach. "I don't understand what you're getting at." "I think you do." Marshall's eyes were predatory now, all pretense of warmth vanished. "I'm a man who has everything money can buy, Mr. Bennett. I've built empires, influenced elections, changed the very landscape of this country's economy. And yet there's something I cannot seem to acquire through conventional means." "And what might that be?" Walter's voice was barely a whisper. "A certain kind of companionship. A fresh perspective, uncorrupted youth and beauty." Marshall leaned forward. "I want your daughter, Mr. Bennett, not as an employee, not for some tawdry affair. I want her as my companion, living in my home, available exclusively to me." This room seemed to tilt. "You can't be serious. This is obscene. She's my daughter, not some commodity to be traded." Marshall's expression remained impassive. "And yet, is that not what our entire society is built upon? The commodification of everything and everyone? Be honest with yourself, Mr. Bennett. You've already lost her. After tomorrow you'll have nothing to offer her, no home, no security, no future. Her promising career will be derailed as she takes some menial job to support you both. Is that the life you want for her? Of course not, but with me she'll want for nothing. This home will be hers to enjoy. I'll fund her research, provide her with a state-of-the-art laboratory. She can continue her work, make the scientific breakthroughs she's destined for. And you'll be free of debt, with enough left over to start again somewhere comfortable." Walter stood abruptly, knocking over his untouched drink. "This conversation is over. I can't—" "You have until noon tomorrow," Marshall said calmly, unmoved by Walter's outburst. "After that, Meridian forecloses, and the legal actions begin. Think carefully about what's best for Emily in the long run. Sometimes the most loving choice is the hardest one to make." The drive home passed in a blur. Walter sat rigid in the back seat of the town car, mind racing through impossible scenarios. He could go to the police, but what crime had been committed? Marshall had made an offer, not a threat. He could tell Emily everything, but would that not simply transfer his burden to her shoulders? She would insist on helping, on sacrificing her future to save him from his own poor choices. By the time he arrived home, it was nearly midnight. The house was dark. Emily wasn't back yet. Walter sat in his office, staring at the phone. In the harsh light of reality, what options did he truly have? Bankruptcy would only delay the inevitable. His professional reputation was already in tatters. At his age, starting over was a fantasy. And Emily? Marshall's words echoed in his mind. What kind of future could he offer her now? A life spent clawing their way out of the hole he had dug. At least with Marshall, she would have opportunities, resources, comfort. Perhaps in time, she might even find some measure of happiness in that gilded cage. The thought made him physically ill. He rushed to the bathroom and retched until there was nothing left but bitter bile. When he looked in the mirror, a broken man stared back at him. A coward. A failure as a father and a man. Yet by dawn his decision was made, not out of courage but from its absence. He called the number Marshall had given him. The conversation lasted less than a minute. "Wise choice, Mr. Bennett," Marshall said, sounding unsurprised. "My attorney will be in touch with the paperwork. You'll find it all quite legally binding and discreet. Emily need not know the exact nature of our arrangement initially. Tell her you've secured an extraordinary opportunity for her, a research position with my foundation, which requires her to live on site. I'll handle the rest." Walter hung up, numb. Outside, the sun rose over the maple trees he had planted decades ago, their red leaves falling like drops of blood onto the frost-covered lawn. In a few hours, Emily would return home, unaware that her father had just sold her future to save his own. But as the day progressed, Walter's resolve began to crack. How could he look his daughter in the eye and feed her this lie? How could he send her into that man's clutches without warning? By afternoon, shame and self-loathing had crystallized into something else: determination. He wouldn't tell Emily the full sordid truth. That would only devastate her. But he wouldn't completely deceive her either. He would present Marshall's offer as what it supposedly was on paper: an exclusive research position with unusual requirements. He would warn her about Marshall's interest in her, prepare her for what might come, and most importantly, he would find a way out of this devil's bargain before it consumed them both. Just before 5, Walter heard Emily's key in the lock. He took a deep breath and straightened his shoulders. He had made a terrible choice, but perhaps there was still time to make it right. He just needed to buy them some time. "Dad? You home?" Emily's voice called from the entryway, bright and unsuspecting. "You won't believe what happened at the lab today." Walter steeled himself and went to greet his daughter, the weight of his betrayal heavy in his chest. He had 24 hours before the papers would arrive. 24 hours to find a way out of the trap he had willingly stepped into. 24 hours before his desperate deal would change both their lives forever. As Emily hugged him, her face alight with enthusiasm about her research breakthrough, Walter held her tightly, wondering if she would ever forgive him once she learned what he had done. And somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered that perhaps there was more to Marshall's interest in Emily than mere desire. Something connected to the past, to secrets long buried, to a history Walter himself had tried to forget. But that was a mystery for another day. Right now he had a choice to make: continue down this dark path, or find the courage to fight for his daughter's freedom, even if it meant sacrificing everything else. Emily Bennett stared at the imposing iron gates of the Marshall estate, her stomach knotting with apprehension. The 2 weeks since her father had told her about this opportunity had passed in a whirlwind of confusion, arguments, and finally, reluctant acceptance. "It's just ahead, miss," the driver said, interrupting her thoughts as the gate swung open silently. Emily clutched her leather satchel tighter. Inside were her research notes, a few cherished books and a small framed photo of her parents, her mother smiling from her hospital bed just months before her illness took her away, and her father standing beside her, his face still unlined by the financial worries that now etched deep grooves around his eyes. The car wound up the long driveway, revealing glimpses of manicured gardens and water features that would have been breathtaking under different circumstances. The mansion itself emerged like a behemoth from the Connecticut landscape, a sprawling, Tudor-style estate that seemed to Emily less like a home and more like a museum, dedicated to one man's wealth and power. "Remember, this is just temporary," she whispered to herself. 6 months, maybe a year, just until Dad gets back on his feet. That's what he had told her, that Calvin Marshall, impressed by her research on sustainable agricultural practices, had offered her a position with his new environmental foundation. The catch: she would need to live on site in a specially designed residence within the estate. The salary was astronomical, enough to clear her father's debts and then some. But something in her father's eyes when he explained it all had set off alarm bells in Emily's mind. "There's something you're not telling me," she had confronted him that night. Her father had aged 10 years in the span of a week. Marshall has a personal interest in you as well, he had finally admitted, unable to meet her eyes. He finds you fascinating. Intellectually, I mean. And if I don't take this position? Her father's silence had told her everything. Now, as the car pulled up to the grand entrance, Emily took a steadying breath. Whatever her father's debts, whatever Marshall's true motivations, she would face this with dignity and intelligence. She was no helpless damsel. She had graduated top of her class from Dartmouth, had published research papers, had always found solutions to complex problems. This was just another problem to solve. The door opened and a tall woman with silver-streaked dark hair and impeccable posture stood waiting. "Miss Bennett, welcome to Blackwater Estate. I'm Mrs. Holloway, the head of household staff." Emily stepped out, straightening her simple navy blazer. "Thank you for meeting me. I wasn't sure what to expect." Mrs. Holloway's expression remained neutral, though something flickered briefly in her eyes. Pity, concern, before she gestured toward the massive oak doors. "Mr. Marshall is eager to meet you, but he understands you might wish to settle into your quarters first. The choice is yours." "I'd prefer to meet Mr. Marshall right away," Emily replied. "Better to face whatever this was head-on." No point in delaying the inevitable. If Mrs. Holloway was surprised by her directness, she didn't show it. "Very well. Please follow me." The interior of the mansion was even more ostentatious than Emily had imagined. Vaulted ceilings, marble floors, artwork that belonged in museums rather than private residences. As they walked through corridor after corridor, Emily catalogued everything with a scientist's precision. 7 staff members spotted so far, 4 visible security cameras, 2 stairways that appeared to lead to upper floors, 1 passage that seemed to descend below ground level. Mrs. Holloway stopped before a set of double doors and knocked once. "Miss Bennett has arrived, sir." "Send her in." The voice from within was deep, commanding. Mrs. Holloway stepped aside, her expression inscrutable. "Good luck," she whispered, so softly Emily almost thought she'd imagined it. The study was a temple to masculine power. Dark wood paneling, leather-bound books, mounted hunting trophies that made Emily's skin crawl. Seated behind an enormous desk was Calvin Marshall himself, rising as she entered. He was taller than she had expected, broad-shouldered despite his 60-some years, with silver hair and piercing blue eyes that assessed her with unconcealed interest. "Emily Bennett," he said, coming around the desk to take her hand. His grip was firm, his skin cool and dry. Even more impressive in person than on paper. Emily withdrew her hand as quickly as politeness allowed. "Mr. Marshall, I appreciate the opportunity to continue my research with your Foundation's resources." A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Direct and professional. I admire that. Please sit." He gestured to a leather chair across from his desk, returning to his own seat. "I'm sure you have questions about your role here." Emily sat back straight, chin up. "I do. Starting with what exactly this foundation does. My father was rather vague on the details. The Marshall Environmental Initiative is quite new," he replied smoothly. "Its mission is to develop sustainable agricultural technologies for deployment in developing nations. Your research on drought-resistant crop varieties particularly caught my attention. I believe with proper funding and support, you could advance that work significantly." It sounded plausible enough, though Emily had never heard of this initiative before her father's sudden announcement. "And my living arrangements? I understood there was a requirement to reside on the estate." Marshall nodded. "Your research will involve sensitive proprietary information. Living on site simplifies security concerns and eliminates commuting time. You'll have an entire wing of the house to yourself, including a state-of-the-art laboratory built to your specifications." "And the duration of this arrangement?" "Initially 1 year, with the option to extend if the partnership proves fruitful." Marshall's gaze was unnerving in its intensity. "Your father mentioned your financial concerns. Rest assured your compensation package includes not only your salary, but assistance with his situation as well." So he knew. Of course he knew. Emily's jaw tightened. "Mr. Marshall, I appreciate directness. What exactly do you expect from me during my time here? And please don't limit your answer to research outputs. For a moment, surprise flickered across his face, quickly replaced by something like admiration. Perceptive. Yes, there is more to this arrangement than your scientific contributions. I've reached a point in my life where traditional relationships no longer satisfy. I seek companionship of a particular quality, intelligent, uncorrupted by cynicism, capable of seeing the world with fresh eyes. You could join a book club, Emily replied dryly, fighting to keep her voice steady despite the creeping dread in her stomach. Unexpectedly, Marshall laughed, a genuine sound that momentarily transformed his severe features. Touché, Miss Bennett. But no, what I seek is more exclusive. I want your perspective, your conversation, your presence at private dinners and events. Nothing more beyond that than what might naturally develop between two people of intellect. Emily didn't believe him for a second, but she nodded slowly. And if nothing more develops? If I fulfill my research obligations, but prefer to keep our interactions purely professional, then that will be respected. Marshall folded his hands on the desk. Everything about this arrangement has been formalized in contracts that protect both our interests. You'll find them in your quarters to review at your leisure. Your father has already signed his portion, but your signature is required before any funds are transferred, which meant her father's debts hung in the balance of her decision. Emily swallowed hard. I'd like to see my accommodations now, if possible, and review those contracts. Of course. Marshall pressed a button on his desk. Mrs. Holloway will show you to your wing. Dinner is at 7 in the main dining room. I look forward to our first proper conversation then. Mrs. Holloway reappeared almost instantly, as if she'd been waiting just outside the door. As Emily stood to leave, Marshall spoke again. One moment, Miss Bennett. He opened a drawer and removed a small velvet box. A welcome gift. Please don't misinterpret the gesture. It's merely something I thought might suit you. Emily hesitated before accepting the box. Inside was a delicate silver pendant, a small, perfectly rendered maple leaf suspended on a fine chain. The silver maple, Marshall said, watching her reaction closely. Acer saccharinum, native to these parts, remarkably resilient against changing conditions, rather like you, I suspect. Emily closed the box without removing the necklace. Thank you for the thought, Mr. Marshall. I'll see you at dinner. Following Mrs. Holloway through more corridors, Emily's mind raced. The pendant unsettled her more than Marshall's veiled implications. How did he know maple trees held special significance for her? The trees her father had planted when she was born, that she'd climbed as a child, that provided the backdrop to every important memory of her youth. Had that been in some background check, or was it merely coincidence? Here we are, Mrs. Holloway announced, stopping before another set of double doors. The east wing is entirely yours. Mr. Marshall had it renovated specifically for your arrival. The wing was larger than any apartment Emily had ever seen, a spacious sitting room opening onto a bedroom with an enormous four-poster bed, a bathroom with a tub that could fit 3 people, a study lined with reference books, and, most impressive of all, a laboratory that put her university facilities to shame. Your luggage arrived yesterday and has been unpacked, Mrs. Holloway explained, opening various doors. The contracts Mr. Marshall mentioned are on the desk in the study. Dinner attire is semi-formal for your first evening. After that, you may dress as you please for private meals. Emily nodded, feeling suddenly overwhelmed. Thank you, Mrs. Holloway. The older woman hesitated, then lowered her voice. Miss Bennett, a word of advice, if I may. Mr. Marshall values precision and punctuality above all. Be where you're expected, when you're expected. It will make your time here easier. Before Emily could respond, Mrs. Holloway was gone, closing the doors behind her with a soft click that sounded ominously like a lock engaging. Emily immediately went to check. The doors opened. Not a prisoner, then, at least not literally. She spent the next hour inspecting every inch of her new domain, looking for cameras or other surveillance devices. She found nothing obvious, but that didn't mean they weren't there. The laboratory equipment was top of the line, exactly what she would have specified herself. The bookshelves contain not only standard scientific texts, but also her favorite novels, including rare first editions of Austen and the Brontes. Finally, she turned to the contracts on the desk. 50 pages of legal language that essentially confirmed what Marshall had outlined. A one-year commitment, living on site, participating in social engagements at Marshall's discretion, maintaining confidentiality about all research and personal interactions. In exchange, a salary that made her eyes widen, immediate clearance of her father's debts, and establishment of a trust fund that would ensure his comfortable retirement. The final page contained a clause that made her blood run cold. Breach of any provision herein by E. Bennett will result in immediate termination of all financial support to W. Bennett and reinstatement of all outstanding debts plus penalties. Her father's fate, tied directly to her compliance. A gilded cage indeed. Emily changed for dinner mechanically, choosing a simple black dress from the closet that was mysteriously filled with clothing in exactly her size. As she fastened a pearl necklace, her mother's, one of the few pieces of jewelry she had brought with her eyes fell on the velvet box containing Marshall's gift. On impulse, she opened it again and examined the maple leaf pendant more closely. The craftsmanship was exquisite, each vein of the leaf perfectly rendered. Turning it over, she noticed something engraved on the back, a date from nearly 25 years ago, and two initials, CM and AS. Emily frowned. The date was approximately a year before her birth. The initials, Calvin Marshall, obviously, but AS, not her mother, whose maiden name had been Linda Reynolds, a former lover. But why put that date on a gift for her? A soft chime interrupted her thoughts, a subtle reminder that dinner approached. Emily tucked the pendant into a drawer and took a deep breath. Time to begin this strange charade. Dinner was a surprisingly subdued affair, just her and Marshall at opposite ends of a table that could seat 20, attended by silent staff who seemed to anticipate their needs before they arose. Marshall kept the conversation light, asking about her research, her time at Dartmouth, her views on climate change policy. Not once did he mention her father or the true nature of their arrangement. It was nearly 9 when they retired to the library for coffee. Emily had just taken her first sip when Marshall abruptly changed the subject. "Your mother was a remarkable woman," he said, watching her over the rim of his cup. Emily nearly choked. "You knew my mother?" Briefly. Marshall's expression turned distant. "Many years ago she had a mind like yours, quick, insightful. She would be proud of what you've accomplished." "How did you know her?" Emily set down her cup, heart racing. "Business connections. Your father was involved in some investments with my company back then." Marshall's tone suggested the subject was closed, but Emily pressed on. "What was she like in a professional context, I mean? I was so young when she became ill, and Dad rarely talks about those days." Something flickered in Marshall's eyes, a shadow of emotion Emily couldn't identify. She was principled, uncompromising in her beliefs, qualities that are unfortunately rare in business. He stood abruptly. "It's getting late, and you've had a long day. We'll continue your orientation tomorrow." Emily recognized the dismissal but lingered. "One more question, if I may. The pendant, the date on the back, what significance does it have?" Marshall's face hardened almost imperceptibly. "A simple production mark from the jeweler, nothing more. Good night, Miss Bennett." Back in her rooms, Emily paced restlessly. Marshall was lying about the pendant, about knowing her mother briefly. There was history there, something significant enough to cause visible discomfort. On impulse, she opened her laptop and pulled up the private email account she maintained separate from her university credentials. She composed a quick message to her father. "Dad, settled in at Marshall's. Everything is fine. Quick question. Did Mom ever know Calvin Marshall? He mentioned meeting her through your business connections years ago. Also, does the name AS mean anything to you? Might be related to Mom somehow. Love, M." She hesitated before sending it. If Marshall was monitoring her communications, this could raise alarms. But she needed answers, and her father was the only one who might have them. As she was about to click send, a notification appeared on her screen. A new email from an unknown address. The subject line made her freeze. "About your mother and Calvin Marshall." Emily glanced around her empty room, suddenly acutely aware of how isolated she was. With shaking fingers, she opened the email. Emily. "We've never met, but I've been watching Marshall for years. Your mother, Amanda Sullivan, didn't just know him. She was involved with him before your birth. The maple leaf was their symbol. Check the old groundskeeper's cottage at the far edge of the property. Northeast corner behind the rose garden. Look for loose floorboards near the fireplace. What you find might explain why you're really here. Stay vigilant. You're not the first young woman he's brought to Blackwater under similar circumstances." A friend. Emily stared at the screen, mind reeling. Amanda Sullivan. Her mother's name was Linda Reynolds before she married Walter Bennett. This had to be a mistake, or some cruel prank. Yet, the maple leaf pendant. The date. Marshall's strange reaction when she mentioned it. She deleted the draft email to her father and closed her laptop. Whoever this friend was, they knew something, or thought they did. The groundskeeper's cottage was mentioned in her orientation materials as part of the estate she was free to explore. Tomorrow, she would begin her investigation. If there were secrets buried at Blackwater, she would unearth them, starting with the truth about her mother and why Calvin Marshall had really brought her here. As she prepared for bed, Emily caught her reflection in the mirror. Her mother's, eyes staring back at her, filled with questions that had suddenly multiplied. Who was Amanda Sullivan? What connection did she have to her mother, to Marshall? And most disturbingly, who had Emily's father sold her to, and why? Outside her window, a waning moon cast silver light across the immaculate grounds of Blackwater Estate. Somewhere in the shadows lurked answers, and Emily was determined to find them, even if they shattered everything she thought she knew about herself and her family. Dawn broke over Blackwater Estate, painting the manicured gardens in hues of gold and amber. Emily had barely slept, her mind churning with questions about the mysterious email. She dressed in jeans and a light sweater, practical clothes for the exploration she had planned, and slipped out of her wing before the rest of the household stirred. The morning air was crisp with early autumn, dew glistening on perfectly trimmed hedges as Emily made her way through the formal gardens. She had studied the estate map provided in her welcome materials, memorizing the layout while formulating a plausible excuse should anyone question her early morning wanderings. "Just familiarizing myself with the grounds," she would say. "I've always been an early riser." The groundskeeper's cottage lay nearly a half-mile from the main house, nestled at the edge of a small copse of trees where the manicured landscape gave way to more natural woodland. It was a picturesque structure, with stone walls and a slate roof, the kind of quaint dwelling that appeared in English novels, though it seemed oddly out of place amid the opulence of Marshall's estate. Emily approached cautiously, eyes scanning for security cameras or motion sensors. She had spotted several throughout the gardens, but none seemed positioned to monitor this remote corner of the property. The cottage door was unlocked, which struck her as either an oversight or an invitation. Inside, dust motes danced in the shafts of early sunlight streaming through grimy windows. The cottage appeared long abandoned, a single room with a kitchenette in one corner, a small bathroom and a stone fireplace that dominated the far wall. Furniture was sparse, a sagging armchair, a wooden table with 2 chairs, and a narrow bed frame stripped of its mattress. "Loose floorboards near the fireplace," Emily murmured, recalling the email's instructions. She knelt before the hearth, tapping carefully at the wooden planks. The third one she tested shifted slightly, offering less resistance than its neighbors. Glancing once more toward the doorway to ensure she was alone, Emily slipped her fingers into the slight gap and pried. The board came up with surprising ease, as if it had been designed to be removed. Beneath it was a small cavity containing a metal lockbox, roughly the size of a hardcover book. Emily lifted it out, her heartbeat quickening. It wasn't locked, another surprise that made her wonder if someone had intended for it to be found. Inside was a bundle of letters tied with faded blue ribbon, a small leather-bound journal, and several photographs, yellowed with age. The first photograph made her gasp. It showed a young woman with long dark hair and familiar eyes, her eyes standing beneath a maple tree. Her arms were wrapped around herself as if holding a precious secret, her smile radiant. Written on the back in flowing script, Amanda, 3 months along our special place, September 1998. 3 months pregnant, September 1998. Emily had been born in March 1999. With trembling fingers, she untied the ribbon and opened the first letter. My dearest Cal. The doctor confirmed it today. We're having a baby girl. I know we never planned this, that your situation makes this complicated, but I've never felt such joy. When she kicks, it's as if she's reminding me that some mistakes are actually miracles in disguise. I've been thinking about names. What do you think of Emily? It was my grandmother's name, and it means industrious. A good quality for a child of ours, don't you think? Strong, determined, capable. Your wife's lawyers contacted me again yesterday. The offer has increased. They're desperate to keep this quiet now that the merger is approaching. I told them, what I've told you, I don't want your money. I want your presence in our daughter's life. If that's impossible because of your arrangements, then I want nothing at all. We'll manage on our own. Meet me at our spot tomorrow. We need to talk about what happens next. All my love, Amanda. Emily sat back on her heels, the letter clutched in her hand. Emily, her name, her identity, casually mentioned in a love letter to Calvin Marshall from a woman claiming to be pregnant with his child, with her, 26 years ago. Her hands shaking visibly now, she sifted through the other papers. More letters detailed an affair spanning nearly 2 years. Amanda Sullivan had been an environmental researcher, like Emily herself, working for a conservation non-profit that opposed a major development project backed by Marshall Enterprises. They had met at a contentious public hearing, argued passionately, on opposite sides, and somehow ended up having dinner together afterward. Opposites attract, one letter read, though I still think your company's development would destroy critical habitat. I just happen to find the company's CEO rather less destructible. The journal entries filled in more gaps. Amanda had discovered her pregnancy 6 months into their relationship. Marshall, already married with 2 children, and in the midst of a high-profile business merger, had been conflicted. He had offered financial support, secrecy, even a house far from Connecticut, where she could raise their child in comfort. What he couldn't offer was a public acknowledgement or his presence in the child's life. The final journal entry, dated November 1998, sent ice through Emily's veins. Cal brought Walter today. He's desperate, just like Cal said, about to lose his accounting practice, his wife in the hospital with mounting medical bills. He has no idea about Cal and me or that I'm carrying Cal's child. He thinks Cal is just a wealthy client offering a lifeline. The arrangement is simple on paper. Walter gets a substantial loan that will save his business and cover Linda's medical treatments. In exchange, he'll quietly marry me in a private ceremony next month, give the baby his name, and never ask questions about her paternity. I agreed to this madness for one reason. Linda Bennett has stage 4 cancer. The doctors give her less than a year. Walter will need someone when she's gone, and my daughter will need a father. Perhaps in time, we might even find genuine affection for each other. What Walter doesn't know, what Cal himself doesn't fully understand, is that I'm doing this to protect my daughter from Cal's world. I've seen what wealth and power have done to him, the compromises he's made, the person he's become. I don't want that for my child. Yet I'm not naive. Cal won't let go easily. He'll watch from a distance, I'm certain, but by the time he tries to reclaim what he believes is his, my daughter will be old enough to make her own choices, and I'll have made sure she has the strength to choose wisely. Emily let the journal fall to her lap, her mind reeling. Walter Bennett, the man she had called father her entire life, was not her biological father. Her mother was not Linda Bennett, who had passed away when Emily was 3, but Amanda Sullivan, a woman she had no memory of. And Calvin Marshall, the man who had brought her to this estate under the pretense of a research position, was her biological father. But where was Amanda Sullivan now? What had happened after that final journal entry? The answer came in the last item in the box, a newspaper clipping dated June 2001, with the headline, "Environmental Researcher Still Missing After Boating Accident." The small article detailed how Amanda Bennett, née Sullivan, had disappeared during a solo kayaking expedition on Long Island Sound, leaving behind a husband and 2-year-old daughter. The search had been called off after 3 days. No body was ever recovered. A boating accident or something made to look like one. Emily's hands were numb as she gathered everything back into the lockbox. Her mind cycled through the implications, each realization more devastating than the last. Walter had married a pregnant Amanda as part of a financial arrangement with Marshall. Linda Bennett had died as predicted. And then Amanda herself had vanished under suspicious circumstances when Emily was barely a toddler. And now, 23 years later, Calvin Marshall had maneuvered to bring her into his home, not as his acknowledged daughter, but under the guise of employment with unsettling undertones of possession. "There you are," a voice said from the doorway, causing Emily to nearly drop the box. Mrs. Holloway stood framed against the morning light, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Marshall has been asking for you. Breakfast is served and he doesn't like to be kept waiting." Emily hurriedly shoved the lockbox back into its hiding place and replaced the floorboard. "I was just exploring, getting to know the grounds." "Indeed." Mrs. Holloway's gaze flickered to the fireplace and back to Emily's face. "This cottage has quite a history. It once housed a young researcher who worked for Mr. Marshall's environmental division. She had a particular interest in maple tree conservation." The pointed comment hung in the air between them. Mrs. Holloway knew something, perhaps everything. "How long have you worked for Mr. Marshall, Mrs. Holloway?" Emily asked, rising to her feet and brushing dust from her jeans. "Nearly 30 years. I've seen many come and go from Blackwater." She stepped aside to let Emily pass through the doorway. "Including your mother." Emily froze. "Which one?" A flicker of something, approval perhaps, crossed Mrs. Holloway's face. Both, in fact. Linda Bennett visited once before her illness advanced. And Amanda. She lived in this cottage for a time. You favor her greatly. They walked in silence back toward the main house, Emily's mind racing with questions she dared not ask outright. As they approached the terrace where breakfast was apparently being served, Mrs. Holloway spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Be careful of the questions you ask, Miss Bennett, but more importantly, be careful of whom you ask them. Not everyone at Blackwater has your best interests at heart." Before Emily could respond, they had reached the terrace where Calvin Marshall sat reading a newspaper, a cup of coffee steaming beside him. He looked up, his penetrating blue eyes, so similar to her own, how had she not noticed before, fixing on her face. "Emily, I was beginning to worry." His tone was light, but something sharp lay beneath it. "I see you've been exploring the grounds." "The gardens are beautiful," she replied evenly, taking the seat across from him, "particularly the maple grove on the eastern edge." Something flickered in his expression. "You have good taste. Those trees were planted 25 years ago. Some of my favorites on the property." 25 years, Emily echoed. "Around the time I was born." Marshall's hand paused imperceptibly as he reached for his coffee cup. "An interesting coincidence." "Is it?" Emily maintained his gaze steadily. "I've found life rarely offers true coincidences, Mr. Marshall. Most things that appear random actually have hidden connections if you know where to look." The tension between them was palpable. Mrs. Holloway quietly placed a plate of eggs Benedict before Emily and retreated. To the periphery, watchful. "You're quite philosophical this morning," Marshall finally said, setting down his newspaper. "Did your exploration yield some insight?" "It raised questions," Emily replied carefully, "about why I'm really here, about what you really want from me." Marshall's expression remained impassive, but his knuckles whitened slightly around his coffee cup. "I believe I was transparent about my expectations, your scientific expertise coupled with companionship of an intellectual nature. And if I told you I know who Amanda Sullivan was?" The cup clattered against its saucer. For a brief moment, Marshall's carefully constructed facade cracked, revealing something raw and painful beneath. Then, just as quickly, the mask slid back into place. "I assume you've been communicating with your father," he said, his voice controlled once more. Walter always was careless with secrets when pressured. "What exactly did he tell you?" "Enough." Emily's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. "Enough to know that our arrangement isn't what you presented it to be. Enough to wonder what happened to my mother, my biological mother, 23 years ago." Marshall studied her for a long moment, then sighed deeply. "You have her directness, her unwillingness to play social games. I always admired that about Amanda." He set down his cup and folded his hands on the table. "What do you want, Emily? To hear me say it aloud? Very well. I am your biological father. Amanda Sullivan was your mother. And yes, I arranged to bring you here because I wanted to know the daughter I never had the chance to raise. Why not simply tell me the truth? Why this elaborate charade? Would you have come if I had? If a stranger had approached you claiming paternity and demanding a relationship?" Marshall's expression hardened. "I needed time. Time for you to see who I am, to perhaps understand the choices I made. Choices like what happened to Amanda." Emily's voice shook slightly. "A convenient boating accident when I was too young to remember her." Anger flashed in Marshall's eyes. "You've clearly found some of Amanda's things, but you don't have the full picture. Your mother's disappearance devastated me. I spent millions on private searches long after the Coast Guard gave up. I never found answers. And yet you waited 23 years to seek out your daughter? Forgive me if I find that difficult to believe." "I didn't wait," Marshall snapped, his composure finally cracking. "I watched over you from a distance your entire life. Who do you think anonymously funded your college scholarship? Who ensured the best universities considered your applications? Who made certain research grants found their way to your projects?" Emily felt as if the ground was shifting beneath her. "You've been manipulating my life from the shadows." "I've been protecting you," Marshall corrected, his voice softening. "As I promised Amanda I would, but from a distance, as she insisted. Until now. Until you manipulated my father's financial situation to force me here." The pieces were falling into place. The loans, the terrible terms, the sudden foreclosure. You engineered all of it to bring me to Blackwater. Marshall had the grace to look momentarily ashamed. "I accelerated a process that was already in motion. Walter's financial troubles were genuine, if exacerbated by my company's actions. I saw an opportunity to finally bring you into my life, to get to know you before what?" He brushed the question aside. "That's immaterial. What matters is that you're here now, and we have a chance to establish a relationship on honest terms." "Honest terms?" Emily laughed bitterly. "You bought me from the man I thought was my father. You hid your true identity. You've been secretly directing my life for years. What about any of this is honest?" Marshall leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Then let's start now. Ask me anything, Emily. About Amanda, about our relationship, about why I've done what I've done. No more secrets." Emily was about to respond when her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out to find a text from an unknown number. "Don't trust anything he says. Check the laboratory in the West Wing basement. Security code 0307. Proof about what really happened to Amanda is there. Come alone tonight. WB Walter Bennett." Was her father here at Blackwater? Emily quickly pocketed the phone, mind racing. Marshall was watching her closely, awaiting her response to his offer of honesty. "I need time," she said finally. "This is overwhelming. You've had 25 years to process this relationship. I've had less than an hour." Something that might have been disappointment crossed Marshall's features, but he nodded. "Of course. Take the day to yourself. We'll talk again when you're ready." As Emily rose to leave, Marshall spoke again, his voice suddenly vulnerable. "She wanted to name you Emily from the beginning, you know. I preferred Catherine after my mother. It was our only real argument during the pregnancy. I'm glad she won that one." The simple admission, so ordinary, so paternal, caught Emily off guard. For a brief moment, she glimpsed what might have been. A normal father, a normal child, her normal life. Then the reality of her situation came rushing back, and with it, the memory of the mysterious text message burning in her pocket. "I'll see you at dinner," she said, neither accepting nor rejecting the olive branch he had extended. Back in her rooms, Emily paced restlessly, mind spinning with revelations and new questions. Was the text truly from her father? How would he have gained access to Blackwater? And what proof could possibly exist in a laboratory about events from 23 years ago? One thing was increasingly clear. Nothing at Blackwater Estate was as it seemed. Not her heritage, not Marshall's. Intentions, not even her own identity. Somewhere beneath the elegant surfaces and practiced smiles lay the truth. About Amanda Sullivan, about Calvin Marshall, and about why Emily Bennett had really been brought to this place of secrets and shadows. As afternoon faded into evening, Emily made her decision. Tonight she would find the West Wing laboratory, she would uncover whatever proof awaited her there, and then, armed with the full truth, she would confront both the father who had sold her and the father who had claimed her. Whatever game was being played at Blackwater, Emily was no longer a pawn, she was a player and she intended to win. The grandfather clock in the main hallway chimed midnight as Emily slipped out of her rooms. She had feigned a headache during dinner, excusing herself early to avoid further conversation with Marshall. Now, dressed in dark clothing and soft-soled shoes, she moved silently through the shadowed corridors of Blackwater Estate. The text message, allegedly from her father, had specified the West Wing basement laboratory. According to the estate plans she'd studied, that section housed Marshall's private research facilities, separate from the lab he'd built for her. Access required passing through the main hall, down a seldom-used service corridor, and through several security points. Emily paused at the first junction, listening intently. Night security at Blackwater was surprisingly minimal. Just 2 guards patrolling the grounds, and one stationed in the security office near the main entrance. Marshall's hubris, perhaps, assuming no one would dare breach his sanctuary. The service corridor was dimly lit by emergency lights mounted near the floor. Emily moved quickly but cautiously, counting doors until she reached the one marked W-Lab access. A keypad glowed faintly beside it. She entered the code from the text message, 0307, March 7th, her birthday. The door unlocked with a soft click. Emily slipped through, finding herself in a sterile white hallway that sloped gently downward. At its end stood another door with another keypad. She tried the same code. This time, it didn't work. Emily bit her lip, considering, if someone, her father, had access to one security code, they might have access to others. She tried several logical combinations. Marshall's birthday, according to her research, the date from the pendant, Amanda's birthday based on the documents she'd found. Nothing worked. Then, a different approach occurred to her. She entered Sarisu 5, March 25th, the date Amanda had disappeared according to the newspaper clipping. The keypad flashed green. The door opened with a soft pneumatic hiss. Beyond lay a laboratory unlike anything Emily had expected. Instead of cutting-edge research equipment, the room was filled with outdated computers, filing cabinets, and walls covered with photographs and documents connected by red string, like something from a detective movie. At the center stood a large table illuminated by a single overhead light, covered with folders bearing dates spanning more than 2 decades. "My God," Emily whispered, taking it all in. This wasn't a laboratory, it was an investigation room. "I've been waiting for you," said a voice from the shadows. Emily spun around, heart hammering. A figure emerged from a dark corner, an older man, thin and stooped, his face deeply lined but his eyes sharp and clear. "Dad?" Emily breathed, recognizing Walter Bennett despite how much he had aged in the mere weeks since she'd last seen him. He shook his head. "Not your father. Never was, though I tried to be." He stepped into the light. "Jonathan Wells, private, investigator. I've been looking into Amanda Sullivan's disappearance for 23 years. Emily's mind reeled. "You sent the text, using my father's initials?" "A necessary deception. Marshall monitors all communications in and out of Blackwater. I needed you to come, but couldn't risk him knowing who was contacting you." Wells gestured to the evidence-covered walls. "Your real father, Walter, hired me 2 weeks ago after Marshall forced him into your arrangement. He wanted to know what he was really getting you into. Emily's gaze swept over the materials, photographs of Amanda at various environmental protests, news clippings about Marshall Enterprises, maps of Long Island Sound with areas circled in red. What is all this? She asked. 23 years of connecting dots. Wells moved to the central table. I was a detective with the Connecticut State Police when Amanda disappeared. The case never sat right with me. Too neat. Too many jurisdictional hurdles conveniently placed to prevent a thorough investigation. When I retired, I kept digging privately. He opened a folder and spread out several photographs. These were taken the week before Amanda disappeared. She was meeting with a lawyer who specialized in custody battles, and these, he laid out another set, show her with a journalist known for exposing corporate corruption. Emily leaned closer, studying the images of the young woman she now knew to be her biological mother. You think Marshall was involved in her disappearance? I think Amanda discovered something that threatened Marshall, something beyond their personal relationship. Wells pulled out a sealed evidence bag containing a USB drive. 3 days ago, I finally got access to Amanda's cloud storage from... Back then, the service was shutting down, purging old accounts. A friend in tech helped me recover the data. Emily took the bag, hands trembling slightly. What's on it? Evidence that Marshall's company was illegally dumping toxic chemicals from their pharmaceutical division into protected wetlands. The same wetlands Amanda was researching when she met Marshall. She had compiled soil samples, internal memos, witness statements, everything needed for a federal case. Wells's expression darkened, and evidence that she was planning to seek full custody of you, citing Marshall's involvement in the environmental crimes as proof he was unfit for parenthood. The implications hit Emily like a physical blow. You're saying he killed her because she was going to expose his company? Because she was going to take me away from him? I'm saying Amanda disappeared under highly suspicious circumstances 3 days after she told Marshall about the evidence and her custody plans. Wells gestured to a map on the wall. Her kayak was found deliberately damaged. The currents that day would not have carried a body where the search focused. And within a week of her disappearance, Marshall's company suddenly announced a complete overhaul of their waste management systems, at great expense. Emily felt physically ill. Why are you showing me this now? Why not go to the authorities? Statute of limitations on the environmental crimes expired years ago. The circumstantial evidence for Amanda's disappearance isn't enough for an exhumation, especially given Marshall's influence. And until recently, I had no idea where all this was leading. Wells handed her another folder. Then Walter contacted me, desperate for help. When he mentioned your research background, your age, Marshall's specific interest in you, the pieces finally aligned. Emily opened the folder to find recent surveillance photos of herself at Dartmouth, at conferences, even jogging near her apartment, all taken from a distance, all without her knowledge. Marshall's been watching you your entire life, Wells confirmed, not just supporting you from afar as he claimed, obsessing, collecting, your academic records, medical history, personal relationships, all documented and analyzed. Why? Emily's voice was barely audible. If he did what you're suggesting to my mother, why fixate on me? Guilt, atonement, obsession, a chance to rewrite history. Wells shrugged, or something darker. The human mind can justify almost anything given enough time and incentive. A noise from the hallway made them both freeze, footsteps approaching slowly. Wells quickly gathered the most crucial documents. There's a service elevator behind that storage cabinet. It leads to the garage level. My car is parked at the perimeter gate. Here's the key. He pressed a car key into her hand, along with the USB drive and a small envelope. Everything you need is on the drive. The envelope contains access to an offshore account Amanda set up in your name before she disappeared, enough to start a new life away from Marshall's influence. You're not coming with me? Wells shook his head. Someone needs to keep them busy while you escape. I've been chasing this truth for too long to run from it now. What about Walter, my father? Emily couldn't reconcile abandoning the man who had raised her, whatever his flaws. Marshall will destroy him when he finds I've gone. Walter made his choice when he sent you here. Wells said, though not unkindly. But he also made arrangements to disappear if necessary. The account information for him is included as well. The footsteps grew louder. Wells moved the cabinet, revealing the hidden elevator door. Go, find your own truth, Emily. That's what Amanda would have wanted. Heart pounding, Emily stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, she caught a final glimpse of Wells straightening his shoulders and moving toward the laboratory entrance, ready to confront whoever approached. The elevator descended silently to the garage level. Emily moved swiftly between the luxury vehicles, finding a side door that led to the exterior grounds. The night air was cool against her face as she skirted the security perimeter, keeping to the shadows of ornamental hedges. She had almost reached the perimeter wall when floodlights suddenly illuminated the grounds. An alarm blared from the main house. They had discovered her absence sooner than expected. Emily broke into a run, abandoning stealth for speed. The perimeter gate came into view, and beyond it, a nondescript sedan that had to be Wells's car. 20 yards, 10-5. "Emily, stop!" Marshall's voice carried across the grounds. He stood on the main terrace, illuminated from behind like some Gothic figure. Even at this distance, she could see the desperation in his posture. "Please, you don't understand." Emily paused, hand on the gate. Despite everything, some part of her, the part that had grown up longing for answers about her origins, wanted to hear what he would say. "I didn't hurt Amanda," Marshall called, starting down the terrace steps toward her. "I loved her. I've spent 23 years trying to find out what really happened." Was it possible? Could Wells be wrong? The uncertainty made her hesitate just long enough for Marshall to continue. "Everything I've done, watching over you, bringing you here, it was to protect you from the same people who took her from us." "What people?" Emily called back, keeping the gate between them as Marshall drew closer. "The investigators? The journalists who were going to expose your company's crimes?" Marshall froze. "How did you—" He recovered quickly. "Those weren't crimes. They were regulatory oversights during a company transition. Amanda misunderstood what she found. When she confronted me, I promised to fix it, and I did. Ask anyone who worked for me then." "After she disappeared," Emily countered. "How convenient." "Emily, please." Marshall's voice softened, becoming almost pleading. "I'm your father. Whatever you've been told, whatever you've found, it's not the whole truth. Come back inside. Let me explain everything." For a moment, Emily almost believed him. The naked emotion in his voice seemed genuine. But then she remembered the photographs in the lab, years of surveillance, of manipulation, the calculated way he had engineered her arrival at Blackwater, the contract that had essentially purchased her from Walter. "A real father wouldn't buy his daughter," she said finally. "A real father wouldn't manipulate her entire life from the shadows. A real father would have been honest from the beginning." Marshall's expression hardened. "You've been listening to Wells. He's been obsessed with this case with me for decades. He has no proof of anything, just theories and coincidences. Then why hide all that evidence in a secret lab? Why monitor my entire life without revealing yourself?" Emily shook her head. "I don't know exactly what happened to Amanda. Maybe you don't either. But I know I can't trust you to tell me the truth about it." She turned to the gate, inserting the key into the lock. "If you leave now, you'll never know for certain," Marshall called, a last desperate attempt. "All the resources I have, all the connections, they could help find the truth about Amanda. Stay, and I swear I'll share everything I know, everything I've found over the years." Emily paused, her hand on the gate. "Send it to Wells. If you truly want me to have the truth, you don't need me here to share it." Without waiting for a response, she pushed through the gate and ran to the waiting car. As she slid behind the wheel, she glanced back. Marshall stood at the gate, watching her, making no move to physically stop her. Something in his stillness, in the defeated slump of his shoulders, sparked a moment of doubt. But as the engine roared to life and Emily pulled away from Blackwater Estate, that doubt was overshadowed by a growing sense of determination. Whatever the full truth about her parentage, about Amanda's fate, about Marshall's motives, she would uncover it on her own terms, not as a prisoner in a gilded cage. 3 days later, Emily sat in a small cafe in Montreal, laptop open before her, examining the contents of the USB drive. Wells had been thorough, backing up not only Amanda's original evidence, but years of his own investigation. The environmental crimes were well documented, internal memos, soil samples, witness statements, exactly as he'd described. But there was more. Amanda's personal journals revealed a woman torn between her principles and her feelings for Marshall, between her determination to expose corporate wrongdoing and her desire to give her daughter a relationship with her biological father. The final entries showed increasing fear, not of Marshall directly, but of others within his company who had more to lose from exposure. Most surprising was a video file dated 3 days before Amanda's disappearance, a video will of sorts addressed to Emily. "My darling girl," Amanda began, her face so similar to Emily's own that it was like looking into a mirror of time. "If you're watching this, something has happened to me. I hope it hasn't, that I'm there with you now, watching you grow into the remarkable woman I know you'll become, but I have to be prepared." Emily touched the screen, tracing the contours of her mother's face as she continued. "There are people who want to silence me because of what I've discovered. Your father, Calvin, knows some of it, but not everything. I don't think he would hurt me, but I can't be certain he can control those who would. So I've made arrangements. If anything happens to me, you'll be raised by Walter Bennett, a good man who has agreed to protect you. And when you're old enough, when it's safe, you'll receive this message and the truth about your heritage." Amanda's eyes, Emily's eyes, filled with tears. "I wish I could have watched you grow up. I wish we could have walked through forests together, studied plants and animals, made the world better in our own small ways. But know this, whatever happens to me, my love for you is boundless. You are my greatest achievement, my most perfect creation. Be brave, be kind, be true to yourself, and forgive Calvin if you can. He loves you in his way, though his way is complicated by power and privilege." The video ended, freezing on Amanda's face, serene, determined, loving. Emily closed, the laptop, tears streaming down her cheeks. The cafe bustled around her, patrons oblivious to the seismic shift occurring at her small corner table. She had come seeking answers about Amanda Sullivan and Calvin Marshall. She had found something more profound, a reclamation of her own identity, a legacy of courage and conviction. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an encrypted number she recognized as Wells's. Marshall cooperating, providing old case files, seems genuinely determined to find truth about AS. "What's your next move?" Emily considered the question, gazing out at the Montreal street scene. Her entire life had been defined by secrets others had kept from her, decisions others had made for her. Now, for the first time, her path was truly her own to choose. She typed her response, continuing Amanda's work, environmental research, corporate accountability, using offshore account to fund independent lab, will contact when settled. After sending the message, she added a postscript. "Tell Walter I understand why he did what he did. No need to run anymore. I'll be in touch when I'm ready." As for Marshall, Emily wasn't ready to absolve or condemn him. Perhaps he had loved Amanda. Perhaps he had been searching for the truth all these years. Perhaps his obsession with Emily came from genuine paternal feeling, however warped by wealth and power. But understanding him, even forgiving him someday, didn't mean returning to his controlled environment. Amanda had wanted more for her daughter: freedom, integrity, the courage to stand for what was right. Emily intended to honor that legacy. 1 week later, in a small but well-equipped laboratory space in Toronto, Emily unpacked the last of her equipment. The offshore account Amanda had established contained not just money but detailed research notes on the environmental project she had been pursuing before her disappearance, work that remained relevant and unfinished. On the wall, Emily had pinned a single photograph, Amanda beneath the maple tree, arms wrapped around her pregnant belly, smiling at the future. Beside it hung her mother's silver maple pendant, a reminder of where she came from and what she was fighting for. Her phone chimed with an email notification. Opening it, she found a message from an anonymous account containing only a document, attachment. The file was a scanned letter, handwritten on Blackwater Estate stationery. Emily, I won't ask for forgiveness I haven't earned. I won't ask you to believe what I cannot prove. I won't even ask you to read this beyond the first paragraph if you choose not to. What I will do is provide you with the truth as I know it, and the resources to discover what I don't. Enclosed with this letter, delivered separately through Wells, is access to a trust in your name. Not a bribe or a chain, but your birthright. No strings attached. Use it or don't. The choice, like all choices from now on, is entirely yours. I have also transferred all of Amanda's research data, soil samples and original findings to Wells. Perhaps with modern testing methods, you can complete what she started. Justice has no statute of limitations in the moral universe, even if the legal one has expired. I am continuing my own investigation into what really happened that day on the Sound, not to exonerate myself. Nothing can erase my failures towards Amanda or you, but because the truth matters. If I find anything concrete, Wells will receive it immediately. You asked once why I waited so long to bring you into my life. The honest answer is fear. Fear that you would look at me exactly as you did that night at the gate. Fear that you would see all my flaws, my compromises, my fundamental brokenness. Fear that you would choose Amanda's path of principle over my path of power. You have chosen, and rightly so. You are your mother's daughter in all the ways that matter most. For that alone I am prouder than I have any right to be. Be well, Emily, be free, be exactly who you are meant to be. Calvin. Emily read the letter twice, emotions warring within her. She folded it carefully and placed it in her desk drawer, not discarded, not embraced, but acknowledged as part of the complex tapestry of her origins. Outside her laboratory window, a young maple tree swayed in the autumn breeze, its leaves turning crimson and gold. Emily had planted it her first day in Toronto, a symbolic gesture connecting past to future. Whatever came next, whether she found definitive answers about Amanda's fate, whether she made breakthrough discoveries in environmental science, whether she eventually reconnected with Walter or even with Calvin, Emily faced it on her own terms, unbound by secrets or obligations not of her choosing. The maple leaf pendant caught the afternoon light, casting prismatic patterns across her workspace. Emily touched it briefly, then turned to her research notes. Amanda's work remained unfinished. It was time for her daughter to continue it, with the same courage and conviction that had defined her mother's brief but consequential life. In that moment, surrounded by scientific equipment and illuminated by autumn sunlight, Emily Bennett, daughter of Amanda Sullivan, biological child of Calvin Marshall, raised by Walter Bennett, became simply Emily, author of her own story, reclaimer of her own legacy. And that was enough. Dear listeners, we hope Emily's journey through deception and discovery moved you as deeply as it moved us. The search for truth, about ourselves, our origins, our purpose, resonates in all of us, whether we're uncovering family secrets or simply trying to understand our place in the world. For more compelling stories that explore the complexities of identity and the power of determination, we've created a special playlist you'll find by clicking to your left. If this tale of reclaimed legacy touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day we bring you unique narratives that delve into life's most profound questions and transformations.